Sure, there are many elements, but one that I would single out would be the willingness to experiment, which is the same as willingness to fail, right? And people, they're afraid to try things sometimes, but that's how we learn. If you want to learn how to ski, if you want to learn how to speak a new language, you have to be willing to do it badly for a little while. And so all innovators are willing to experiment. They're willing to fail, but fail on their way to success. We think that the human element drives most innovations. In the history of innovation, if you go in the back room and come up with a cool technology and bring it out into the world, sometimes the world doesn't want your technology. But if you start from humans and say, what do humans really need? And then if you start from there and think about, okay, what technologies do I have that can help with that human need? We think your innovation has a much, much greater chance of success. Because the anthropologist helps you figure out what problem to solve. People talk so much about problem solving, but really for innovators, there's something that comes before problem solving, and we would call it need finding, right? Customers, humans, have latent needs. They don't raise their hand and say, I'd like an iPhone when one doesn't exist, or a Walkman, or Facebook. I didn't know I needed Facebook until Facebook existed, right? And so the anthropologist's job is not to ask people, what do you need? The anthropologist's job is to observe human behavior and figure out what their latent needs are, the underlying needs that the person themselves can't even articulate. The main role of the leader is to make sure that everyone feels empowered to express their ideas, right? That leader may ultimately have the power to decide, right? They might choose among the ideas. They might decide what we're going to invest in and not invest in, and that's fine. They need to maintain control of their power maybe, but what they don't want is they don't want to be in charge of all the ideas, because then you only have the ideas inside one person's head. If you have 100 employees, you want all 100 of those people to be thinking of new ideas every day. And so that's the leader's job, is to bring out that creative ability in the team. Where do new ideas come from? There's a whole book by Stephen Johnson on that subject, and I know Stephen pretty well. But where do ideas come from for us? We get inspiration on the streets, right? When we're with people. We never bring people into our office and have them, try to use a product or a service. We go out and we observe how people use, and we always find quirky behaviors. We always find surprises. Now, sometimes we can't turn that new insight into a profitable innovation, but usually there's an opportunity there when we go and observe human behavior and we get a new discovery.
Human beings are pretty creative, and our organizations not so much. Every day, 500,000 hours of new content goes up on YouTube. Every day, 3 million blogs are published on WordPress. Thousands of new projects are launched on crowdfunding sites. 1,300 apps get uploaded to Google Play, and 40 million photos go up onto Instagram. And not all of them are Kim Kardashian, just some of them, right? And so, we are not short of creativity in our world. And yet, most organizations struggle with innovation. One study, this was by Boston Consulting Group, and this is a few years ago, but I don't think anything has changed. 79% of executives said that innovation is an important priority. Of course it is. Innovation is the only insurance against irrelevance. It's the only protection against commoditization. It's the only guarantee of long-term customer loyalty. But in another study by McKinsey, 94% of leaders said their organizations weren't very good at it. And I can tell you that doesn't surprise me. Think about this. Here's a little survey you can do in your organization. You think you're serious about innovation, Here's a survey. Because every CEO I meet today says, Gary, we are very serious about innovation. I say, let's test that. Let's go talk to frontline employees in the call centers, technical support, in the warehouses, in the factories, wherever they are. And let's ask employees 3 questions. The first question is, have you actually been trained as a business innovator? Has the company made any investment in your creative capital? What do you think is the answer? No. Second question, if you have an idea, is there some internal version of Kickstarter that makes it easy to get experimental funding? Or do you have to fight your way up the hierarchy and through bureaucracy to get a few $1,000s, a few hours to experiment with something new? But is it easy to launch an experiment? No. And then the last question, is it clear to you that your boss, your manager, is accountable for innovation? Are there clear measurements on number of ideas, quality of ideas, how quickly they go into the pipeline, and so on? And does your manager talk about those metrics? Does it influence their salary, their compensation? Again, the answer is no. So I have to go back to the CEO and say, you don't teach people how to do this, you don't make it easy, and you don't hold people accountable. So how are you serious about this? I don't understand, right? Doesn't look serious to me. And yet, we need to get serious. Innovation needs to become an instinctive activity in our organizations, because you can't build an evolutionary advantage without an innovation advantage. Innovation in business, as in biology, innovation is the fuel for renewal.
Open innovation is a concept about the process of innovation, whereby companies and organizations bring in ideas from outside into their innovation process and let ideas from inside that are not being used go outside for others to use. So there's an outside-in part and an inside-out part. So open innovation today is becoming more open, but also more parties are engaged. In the past, it might have been one company working with another company. Today, we now think about ecosystems and networks of many organizations, some of them for-profit, some of them not-for-profit or public sector, all of them collaborating together. I have seen the idea of lean startup becoming more and more attractive inside large companies. But it requires a different way of working with small and medium companies and startup companies to do the lean, agile approach. One issue that we've already discussed is making decisions more quickly. Another issue I see is that in a large company, they have to consult groups that are not typically involved in the lean startup in small companies. For example, one idea in lean startup is the minimum viable product. And this is something that you put together quickly to try to engage with early customers to get better feedback sooner. The problem is that in the large organization, there is a quality group that is in charge of quality for the whole company. And they look at the minimum viable product and they say, that's a terrible product. It isn't designed for quality. It isn't designed for reliability. It isn't designed to scale. And so it creates a conflict when a large company tries to bring a lean process to do this. So this must be overcome by the lean startup company to be successful. And one way you can overcome it is with open innovation, where more of the work is given to the small company in the early stage to create that minimum viable product. And then if the customers like the product, then you can engage the internal group to do a better job of developing a higher quality product for later on. Open innovation does have a bright future in a more global world. One of the things I see from California is more and more new technologies and new ideas coming from Finland, coming from India, coming from Israel or Taiwan. It's truly becoming a more global marketplace for ideas, for innovations, for new things. So it's an exciting time if you are open, because there are so many possibilities. At the same time, we have to figure out ways to create good employment and good jobs for the people in our country so that they have the income so they can buy these products and these services. And this is an area where more work needs to be done. Innovation isn't only for the large, successful companies. Innovation to be sustainable has to be for all of us. And I think this is a challenge in this global world that we're still working on, and we have more work to do there.
When we discover that our experiments have stopped being productive, let us pivot to a new fundamental strategy that could allow us to do better experiments. That's what a pivot is.
I was groping around for a way to describe a phenomenon that I kept seeing in the startups I was working with. So I wrote a blog post. I mean, the blog post, it wasn't like coining the term pivot, it just said, pivot, don't jump to a new vision. Now I'm good at encapsulating it crisply. A pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. I show in my slides now a cartoon I saw, I kid you not, in the New Yorker magazine. There's a man and a woman sitting in an outdoor cafe, and the caption below says, "I'm not leaving you, I'm pivoting to another man." So the word pivot is probably my most notorious contribution to the startup vernacular. Here's the critical thing you got to understand about the pivot. It's really very simple. You get in your car, you don't boot up your GPS and say, GPS, where do I want to go? It doesn't know, it's just a robot. It helps you get where you want to go. So the vision is the destination you have in mind. But if you run into an obstacle, you don't just drive your car into the obstacle over and over again in the hopes that it will be fine. You, with the help of your GPS, find a way around. Okay, very simple. Startups that succeed all do that really well. They start out with an idea that sounds good, but turns out to be terrible. YouTube started out as a dating site, and they only after people were starting to upload all kinds of video did they make the pivot to a video site. Flickr was an online video game. One of the things you could do in the online game was upload photos. And since that's the only thing players actually did, they said, hey, man, let me make it, we call it a zoom-in pivot, where you take one part of the product and you make the whole product, you shrink it down to just that one thing. You make the world's best photo uploading service, even though you meant to make an online game. First version of Twitter was this thing called Odeo, which is a podcasting service. When they made the pivot to Twitter, it only had a few hundred customers, so the so-called vanity metrics were so low, they actually went to their investors and said, we're so embarrassed about these results, would you like your money back? And several of Silicon Valley's best investors made what is now a billion-dollar mistake of saying, yes, thank you. If you look at PayPal, which is about like digital cyber cash on your PDA. You're like, boy, what kind of visionary is that? But they had the vision for online payments in some form. They just didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. Let's talk about Groupon, because it's one of my favorites. Groupon started out as a business called The Point, which was designed to help people do petitions. So imagine that you're like, okay, I want to do a protest at City Hall. I'm mad about something. I don't want to be the only person who shows up. So we have a petition where if 100 people sign up and say, we'll all go to the protest, it tips and we all do it. If we never get to 100, it doesn't tip. Great idea, right? Wrong. They got no traction at all. It was a disaster. Didn't work. So they're like, okay, we got to try something new. They decided to try the social commerce thing. Social commerce is about creating coupons where we all get a discount if we all buy at the same time. I think it was 2-for-1 pizza in the pizza restaurant in the lobby of their building. Okay, that was the breakthrough technology. 20 people redeemed it. Now, I don't know about you. If I had been there, I would have known. Oh, obviously, 20 free pizzas equals fastest company in history to get $1 billion in sales. But most of us, let's be honest, we would not have known. 20 free pizzas, whatever. The reason the Groupon founders understood the power of selling 20 free pizzas is that they had failed for a year to get anybody to buy anything at all. That actually made them excited enough to try the next experiment and the next and the next and the next. That's what a pivot is. It is redeeming the failure because we learned so much about what's possible. That's the name of the game. That's what this is about.
Ideas actually don't matter. Ideas are free, they're there, it's just a starting point. And when I see companies, investing in idea management software, I only have to laugh because that's the beginning of the process. Again, what's hard is turning an idea into value propositions that customers want and a business model that can scale. What that means is you invest in 100, 200 different teams, small amounts of money, and let them explore ideas. And gradually, you weed out, number one, the bad ideas, and number two, the teams that are not entrepreneurial enough and can't bring evidence to the table. So it's not about selecting ideas, it's about, almost with an evolutionary process, getting the best teams with the best ideas to stand out. And that's how you'll get the real growth engines. And that's what the great innovators of our time actually do.